Oops. Okay, cool. Okay, great. So thank you folks so much for joining us. My name is James. I manage operations at Multitudes, and one of those roles is that I get to help curate our Tech Leader Chat series. So for those of you who are new to Tech Leader Chats, this is a group of engineering leaders who care deeply about people and culture. And we really come together and have monthly talks about insightful topics for which we can all learn and bring back to our teams. Multitudes is a product that helps engineering teams improve their performance, collaboration, and well-being, while always keeping in the forefront that lens of focus on people. So today we're really excited to kick off our 2024 season or 2024 year of Tech Leader Chats with Andrew Murphy. So Andrew has been in the tech industry for over a decade, and he's a member of our Tech Leader Chat Slack, which is where we kind of continue these discussions, and I'll plug that later, but you should all join. He's been a really active contributor of that Slack group, and you can really tell that there's such a huge focus from Andrew on sharing best practices, sharing knowledge, and helping upskill other folks, especially new leaders. I know that that's something that, Andrew, from your experience, you mentioned when you made that transition, there wasn't a lot of good resources. And so I really admire you for taking the step to give back. And this is such a relevant topic in this macroeconomic environment where a lot of engineering leaders are being asked to do more coding. So really excited to hear from you on this topic. And with that, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, James. Thanks for the great intro. I'll do a little bit more on me later, but I like to start these kind of talks with a story, generally a story that humiliates me. And the reason I do that is for two reasons. The first reason, because I want you to understand why this topic is meaningful for me personally. And one of the ways I can help you see that is by telling you how I messed up in the past. And so that's one of the reasons I tell the story. The other reason I tell the story is to make you feel sorry for me so that you all vote this talk highly and James invites me back. With no reason other than those, I'll tell you this story. So like James says, I've been a tech leader for quite a long time now. I've been in the industry about 20 years. And I've been a tech leader for about 15 of those years. And I got into tech leadership really early in my career. By the time I was 24 years old, I was leading a team of 10 people. What 24-year-old knows how to be a good employee, let alone a good leader? And so I made a bunch of mistakes in my early leadership journey. And unfortunately, as a leader, a lot of those mistakes we make are mistakes with people. And so there's a lot of stories I have from my early leadership experiences that I'm quite embarrassed about because of the mistakes that I made. This is one of those. So I was running a team of about 5 or 6 people. I built this code base that we were working on. I'd created this entirely from scratch for this company. I was the sole engineer, and then we ended up hiring people in to help me build this software. And of course, being the longest tenure person and being the person that knew the code base the most, I was the default pick for leader. And being the arrogant 24-year-old that I was, of course I can do that job. I'm the best coder I know. I can be the best tech lead that I know. And so I became the tech lead of this team. And I started doing a lot of behaviors that, looking back on it, with reflection, with 15 years of reflection, I see were terrible behaviors, but at the time I didn't see it. One of them that's relevant to what we're going to talk about today led to a circumstance where I had to wear a paper hat to eat my lunch. And that paper hat said the words, "Andrew is on lunch" on it. The reason why I had to wear this hat is because I wanted to help my team. I genuinely wanted to help them. And so every time they came to me with a problem, I gave them the solution to the problem straight away. And they'd come to me with a problem, and I give them the solution. And they'd come to me with a problem, and I give them the solution. And this pattern just kept repeating itself and repeating itself to the point where every time they had an issue, I was the solution to that issue. I became the nexus of all information in the squad to the point where I couldn't even have my lunch break because my team was bothering me. And so one of my team as the solution to this problem, created a hat that said Andrew is on lunch on it. And the rule in the team was that if I was wearing this hat, nobody was to bother me. At 24 years old, I saw this as a perfectly appropriate solution to the problem. The problem I had was that people were bothering me in my lunch break, and the solution was tell them to go away. Reflecting on that with 15 years of leadership experience, I can see there's a whole heap of mistakes I made there. Becoming the nexus of all information was not the right choice. I should have empowered my team and enabled them to solve the problems by themselves. I should have created artifacts and databases of knowledge that allow people to solve these solutions themselves. And my time management skills, which is where we're going to get to in the meat of this, were atrocious because I didn't separate the time that I was spending as an IC from the time that I was helping them become better ICs themselves. And so that's the meat of what we're going to talk about. Let me just start my screen share. Okay, so the title of this presentation is How to Balance IT Work and Manager Work. There's going to be about 20 minutes of me talking, and then we're going to move into a Q&A at the end. I have more than 20 minutes of content. I like to pack this stuff deep. So I'm going to skip through some bits, but if you want to know about it, ask me in the Q&A, and we'll go back and we'll dive into that bit a little bit deeper. Cool. All right. So we're going to roughly go through why we're even talking about this, my 4 tips for balancing the work, and then, like I said, we'll go into Q&A and group discussion. From a personal point of view, I've said this a couple of times, I'm Andrew Murphy. I'm the longtime father of a flock of chickens, or as we call them in Australia, chucks. And I'm the short-term father of a flock of humans, or as we call them in Australia, financial burdens. And I love travel, and I love getting around and seeing the world. From a professional point of view, like I said, I've been in this industry for about 20 years at this point, been leading teams for about 15. And I was a bad leader, a really, really bad leader. And like James said, there wasn't a lot of resources out there when I moved into this. And so I had to learn things the hard way. And about a few years ago, I decided that I was going to make a change in my career, which was to put a focus on helping people become better tech leaders. Because, like I said, the problem with making mistakes as a tech leader is you often make those mistakes on other people, and that's not fair on them. And we do a really, really bad job in this industry of helping people make that transition from individual contributor to leader. And I wanted to fix that so that the new leaders in our industry don't have to take the 15 years that I took to become the leader that I am today. And so I started training about 6 years ago. Most recently started a company called Tech Leaders Launchpad that solely focuses on helping tech leaders become better. As for why I started doing this presentation, this was an article in the AFR, the Australian Financial Review, which we can link to. But effectively, this came out about halfway through last year, where a lot of companies are what I call compressing leadership. So Atlassian, for example, got rid of an entire level of engineering management, which then meant that you had to choose between either effectively being 90% IC and 10% leader, or 90% leader and 10% IC. And it's a really, really tough choice between those. And it led to a lot of people kind of feeling this sensation that how can I be a leader if I have to spend most of my time coding? Or how can I stay true to being an engineer if I don't get on the tools at all? And this is a pattern that we're seeing across the industry where people are just not recognizing the reward that they can get from having leaders across all levels in their teams. And they're trying to compress leadership and to take it out. I personally hate this. I think there's roles for people to do this kind of stuff. However, some people are in this situation. And if you're in this situation through no fault of your own, then hopefully you can learn something from the discussion that we're going to have today to help you cope with that situation. And I commiserate for you being in there and I hope I can help take off some of the sting from it. So I do a lot of one-on-one coaching and group coaching, and often people will come to me when they become a manager or a leader for the first time, and they'll say to me, should I just split my week 50-50? Monday to Wednesday lunchtime, I'm an IC, and Wednesday lunchtime to 5:30 on Friday, I'm a leader. And that's how it works, isn't it? I can do a bit of both. Well, no, that's not how it works. The issue with this is a lot of work is either proactive or reactive. And by proactive, what I mean is work that you can schedule and plan out in the past. Reactive work is responding to things that happen as they happen. And this approach assumes that all your work is proactive, which is just simply not the case for a lot of people. If you're a leader, you might have people coming to you with issues that are reactive. You might have systems that go down that are reactive. You might, if you work in a startup or a scale up, there might be a need to respond to an investment event or a particular client issue. So there's always going to be reactive things that pop up. And so planning your work in this way of 50-50 just is never going to work. You have to come up with a pattern and a system that's more responsive to your ways of working. And that's what we're going to talk about. So the four things that we're going to touch on today of how to deal with this time management issue are self-scheduling, looking after your own calendar yourself and taking control of it. Conscious decision-making, not defaulting into patterns of behavior just because they're the easy options, but actually really consciously deciding on where you spend your time and how you spend it. Delegation, what are the upsides and downsides of delegation, and how can you make a decision on if something should be delegated or not? And then self-care, because this stuff is hard, it's really hard. And if you don't look after yourself, how can you look after your team? And so those are the four things we're going to touch on. Let's go through self-scheduling. It's kind of back to this question again. Should I just split my week 50-50? Well, no, but yes. No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't split your week 50-50. But what you should be doing is you should be splitting your week into time for reactive stuff that happens and also focused leadership time. The problem with a lot of leadership work is that we have this stuff that crops up all the time that we're not able to respond to because we're too busy dealing with other things that have cropped up. And we can't get to the longer term strategy work because we're dealing with everything that crops up. And so, the number one tip that I have for you if you're struggling with time management in this area of leadership work versus IC work is book time in your calendar for leadership work. This can be things like coming up with strategies. It can be preparing for performance reviews. It can be looking through, a peer review that you want somebody to go through. It can be anything that is longer term impact rather than short term reactionary. Now, the next question you're likely going to ask me is, how much leadership time should I book in? This is where the next section, conscious decision making, goes in. So we'll touch on that in a second. The next question you're probably going to ask me is, well, if I book an hour in my calendar, how do I make sure that I actually can spend that hour on leadership time? Now, this is where I have some tips for you, which seem a little bit sneaky, but I'm sorry, sometimes we have to be a little bit sneaky. I often will book in a meeting with my boss, and the title of the meeting will be TPS reports. I have pre-warned my boss that if he ever sees a meeting called TPS reports, it's not a real meeting and he can ignore it. And the reason why I do this is if somebody sees a meeting in your calendar and you're the only person, and it says like plan for performance reviews, then people are just going to ignore it. And they're just going to hit you up on Slack. They're going to message you. They're going to try and get hold of you. But if they see a meeting that says TPS report and it's you and your boss, they're much less likely to disturb you. So this is how we can go about protecting our leadership time. because the only person that knows your calendar, the only person that knows your time needs and your time requirements and your time demands is you. And so the only person that can protect your calendar is you. And you've got to take proactive steps. You've got to grab a hold of that calendar, because feeling this sense of overwhelm that often comes from too many things on our plate often comes from not spending time on the areas that make longer term progress and only spending time on the things that are short term and reactionary. The next question you're going to probably ask me is, well, what if there just is too much reactive stuff to do? What if I just cannot, I'm just too busy reacting to things? This is where the conscious decisions come in, because we have to protect ourselves. We have to protect this time. We have to decide what we're doing in this so that we can move some of the other stuff to the rest of our team. So the stuff that we do in our leadership time has to be truly, truly valuable work. And the way we decide what is valuable to do in our leadership time is the impact of that work. So often I'm a really keen believer on having clear definitions of words, because by defining what a word means, it gives us power to enable us to make decisions. And when I say impact of work, what I'm meaning here is, what are the outcomes of that work? Often as technical people, knowledge workers, we get fixated on outputs. How many lines of code have I written? What feature have I added? How many PRs have I done this week? Those are outputs. But those things are not valuable. Lines of code are not valuable. Features in themselves are not valuable. It's the things that they enable in other people's lives that are the value. Those are the outcomes of those outputs. And here I want you to apply the same lens to your leadership work, to make a decision on which things you can do and which things you shouldn't do. Don't focus on the output, focus on the outcome. Doing performance reviews feels like it's just, this is just a checkbox I've got to tick. I've just got to get the output of writing all of these performance reviews. That's the thing that I want. I want the output of writing all these reviews. But that's not the real truth. The real truth is that the outcome of doing those performance reviews is that people feel cared for, people feel supported, people feel developed. And so they're more engaged, more interested, less likely to leave. And so this distinction and separation between the output that you're generating and the outcome that output gives you is the impact. And that's how you make the decision on what to spend time on. And so these are some examples. I'm not going to go through all of them. These are some examples of things that have a high impact that you can do in your leadership time. Communication and collaboration with everybody around you, both your team, your peers, your boss, other teams. This is all hugely valuable stuff. Continuous learning, making yourself better, making people feel recognized and giving them feedback has huge outcomes and huge impacts on your team. And working on automation and efficiency work. If you can invest 2 hours into something that saves your team 20 hours, that's a really good investment of time. Things you can consider adjusting or delegating if you're feeling yourself stretched for time are things like direct involvement in all your technical tasks. Are you really the right person to be doing that, or could somebody else do it? Low impact meetings. We all get a lot of meetings on our calendar, and I'm a big believer in that if somebody can't tell you what they want from you in that meeting, just decline the meeting. Why do they want you there? What value are you going to add? If they cannot express that to you, don't go. Just decline the meeting. If they can give you a description of the value that you add in that meeting, consider going. Another option is if they just want somebody from engineering there, that's a great example of something you can delegate to somebody else in your team, to give them the opportunity to grow and to experience these things. Consider delegating ceremonies. If you're always running the retro or you're always running stand-up, how can you delegate those? How can you help your team empower themselves and gain some of that time back? Another thing is training and onboarding. Often this stuff is by default given to the tech lead. I'm actually a fan of not doing that. I'm a fan of training and onboarding being given to junior and mid-level engineers, because what that does is that forces those people to learn well enough to teach somebody else. And so it feels like the quick, easy decision is just to give the training and onboarding to the person with the most experience. But what you're doing there is you're focusing on the short-term outcome, not the long-term outcome. By giving it to the more junior people, you're putting them in a place that forces them to grow and forces them to question things, because they're going to get asked questions from the new joiner and they're going to have to come up with the answers to those questions. And so it's a really great way of A, getting some of your time back, and B, encouraging others to develop. And the same thing can also be true of recruitment. Although with recruitment, you probably don't want the really junior members doing it, but maybe it's something you can give to seniors and have the juniors there supporting and learning. So make conscious decisions on what you're doing in your leadership time. If you've blocked this time and you've made it sacred and you have these 2 hours on a Monday morning, do more of these things and less of these things. We can go through some of these in more detail. If you see one of these that you're like, oh, I really want to double click on that, in the Q&A at the end, let me know and I can go into it in some more detail. And why shouldn't I do detailed data analysis, etc.? You can ask me those questions. Next is delegation, everybody's favorite topic. This is a great quote, so I do live streams. If you saw James posted about Charity Majors post on communication, I just did a live stream with Charity Majors. I'm doing a live stream with Michael Loff in a few months, and I asked him the question: what's the one thing that if you could implant a thought in every single engineering leader on the planet, what would be the thought that you would implant in their brains? Straight away, he said this phrase: delegate until it hurts. Because this is the superpower of leadership. This is how you spend more time on the things that have more impact and have the double benefit of helping your team grow. So making conscious decisions around delegation is really important. The problem with delegation is deciding what you should delegate. Should I delegate this thing, or should I delegate this other thing? I'm not going to go through this in too much detail, but using a tool and a framework to give decision-making power to you around how you delegate is incredibly powerful. The one that I encourage new leaders to use is called the Eisenhower Matrix. So the Eisenhower Matrix effectively separates work in two dimensions: its urgency and its importance. Often these two words get conflated, but they are fundamentally different concepts. Urgency is time criticality. Importance is impact. So, for example, something can be urgent but not important, or it can be important but not urgent. So say, for example, we do performance reviews in July and we're sat here in January. Planning for those performance reviews, putting the time and effort into it, building those matrices, doing all of that work is not urgent because we've got 6 months to do it. But it's still important. The impact that it makes in having a good performance review in your company is massive. And so it's still important, although it's not urgent. A customer wanting to phone you up and bitch about why a feature has been delayed is definitely urgent because your phone is sat on your desk ringing. Is it important? Potentially, potentially not. Depends on the customer. And so, deciding on whether something is urgent or not, or whether something is important or not, a separate dimension, allows you to make conscious decisions about whether or not you should delegate something. If something is both important and urgent, obviously you need to respond to it straight away. So an example of this, production has gone down. That is important and it's urgent. Redefining the new CI/CD pipeline to shave off 20% from the build time is probably not urgent, maybe important. If that 20% is really important, is that really going to save you the time? Is it worth it? If it is, it's important. If it's not, it's not. So this splitting out of work into the dimensions of urgency and importance allows you to apply a framework to how you delegate things. The framework that I'm about to show you is a framework that I encourage new leaders to use. It might not be appropriate for you. Bear that in mind. If you're somebody who's been leading for 5 years, 10 years, you're probably going to look at this framework and go, no, that's not right for me. That's fine. I'm not asking you to pick this framework. I'm asking you to pick a framework. And this is an example of one. So my suggestion for new leaders is anything important and urgent typically can't wait for your leadership time. It needs to be dealt with straight away. And so it kind of doesn't fit into the delegation framework because you just need to do it. It needs to get done. Something that's important but not urgent, as we're a new leader and we're growing and we're developing in our skills, these should be the focus of your leadership time. These things that have high impact to the company, but are not things that need to be dealt with urgently, are things that you should be scheduling in your 2, 4, 6 hours a week leadership time. Things that are urgent but not important, often these are the things that make you feel busy. So these are the things that, we look at our calendars and we go, oh my God, I've got all this stuff happening. And why am I so busy? I've got no time to do anything. When you actually break down what those things are, 9 times out of 10, they're things that are urgent but not important. And so these are the things for you to consider delegating to somebody else in your team, to help them learn the skills, to help them develop, and to give you the time to do the things that are important but not urgent. Lastly, things that are not important and not urgent, just don't do them. This is things like scrolling social media. We probably shouldn't be doing it. We know we shouldn't be doing it. Just don't do it. Attending that meeting because the person that runs it is annoying and you want to watch them fail because they're going to screw up their presentation and you're going to get a sense of satisfaction from watching this person screw up their presentation. Just don't do it. It's not important. It's not urgent. Focus your time elsewhere. Okay. So again, this framework might not be appropriate for you. Find one that is. Make conscious decisions. You're coming back to this concept again and again. This is all about not defaulting into behavior. Giving yourself decision-making frameworks that enable you to actively and consciously choose what you spend your time on. So lastly, I want to finish on self-care. Self-care is incredibly important. If you can't look after yourself, how can you look after your team? We've all heard of the concept of put your own mask on first. This is something they say if you're in an airplane and the oxygen masks fall down. They often say if you're with children, put your own mask on first before you put on the mask of your child. And they say this because if you're struggling to look after yourself, how can you possibly look after your child? The same is true for leadership. This is a hard job. This is an emotionally challenging, stressful job, especially if you're feeling the pressures of time, especially if you're feeling like you've got demands to be the best individual contributor in the world and the best leader in the world. It's a really hard place to be. And so making sure you're taking the time out of your schedule to focus on yourself, it's not an indulgence. It's not a sign of weakness. Looking after yourself is not an indulgence. It's a requirement of being a leader. If you fail in your resilience, if you fail in your self-care, you're not going to be able to help your team cope with their challenges. And so it can feel like it's an indulgence that, why am I looking after myself when my team is struggling? But it's by looking after yourself, you can help your team to stop struggle. It's a feedback loop. That's a positive, virtuous feedback loop. not a negative, not a negative feedback loop. It's also not a sign of weakness. In the past, there's been this idea that you just need to tough it out and you just need to have more grit. And, I'm sure we've all worked in companies before where, any sign of any mental health issues was just seen as a sign of weakness. Thankfully, unfortunately, this is a change that's happening in the wider culture, but especially so in our industry, is this type of stuff is starting to be taken more and more seriously, and it's not a sign of weakness anymore. If my last role, I had about 8 engineering managers that reported into me. If one of those engineering managers said to me, "Hey Murph, I need to take a day off because I can't cope today," I just be like, "Sure, I got you. That's the way that I would react to it. No thought of mine would go, "Well, why?" That's thankfully not the industry we're in anymore. So what are some of the things you can do to look after yourself? Number one in this is to set realistic expectations for yourself. If you're always trying to set a goal that is completely unachievable and falling flat on yourself, flat on your face, you're never going to feel good about yourself. Setting achievable, realistic expectations is important. Doesn't mean you can't stretch yourself. Doesn't mean you can't set a goal that is slightly more than you think you can achieve. But don't say, "I'm going to be CTO in 5 years" when you've just graduated university. It's unlikely to happen. Really small, basic thing that made a big difference to me, and I joked about this in the beginning, but take your lunch break. Take your lunch break away from your computer. Don't just sit at your desk eating your microwaved meal. Go somewhere else and do it. Go outside, see nature. Go hug a tree somewhere. It genuinely helps to feel like you're decompressing and disconnecting and able to cope better. Another one that's really important for me personally is establishing clear boundaries between your work life and your personal life. I didn't do this in my early career, mostly because I was working in startups that I had equity stakes in. And so, the boundary between work and personal life really gets pretty blurry. But I found my mental health suffered hugely by having that line be blurry. When I started this most recent business, I started it just after my son was born. One thing that I said to my wife, when we were talking about this idea of starting a new business and working in this area, was I want time to spend with my son. And, I want to know that when I'm home, I'm home. And when I'm at work, I'm at work. So even though I have an office at home, I rent an office that I go to. I'm fortunate that I can do that, but I have this clear separation. I take Monday mornings off to spend with my son. I don't work Monday until 12 o'clock. I take a lot of Tuesday off to spend with him. And this is a choice that I make, and thankfully I'm in a fortunate place where I can do that. But what are the things you can do to establish those clear boundaries? Lastly, and again, if you want to double click on any of these in the Q&A at the end, we can. Lastly, celebrate achievements. We are so focused on the future that we forget to celebrate the past and the present. Often we are just thinking, what's the next biggest thing? What's the next thing I can do? And we forget that what we've achieved is immense and humongous and should be celebrated. Part of being motivated for the future and celebrating the past, it's having this weird cognitive dissonance. If you've not heard the term cognitive dissonance before, basically it means holding two completely incompatible thoughts in your head at the same time. Because ideally what we want to do, and the analogy to describe this, is imagine that you go on hikes. Who hikes here? I love a good hike, getting out in nature. Yeah. Do you use like a trail app where you can kind of see the trail and see where you are? No, I do. I love a trail app. I'm a data hoarder, so my location is tracked every minute of every day because I just love the fact that I can just see, oh, where was I? It's actually really good for tax return, finding out where you were when you look at a receipt. Anyway, so if you use trail apps, one of the most demotivating things you can do is to look at the trail app when you think, oh, I must be halfway through this hike by now. I must be near the end of the hike. And then you look at your trail app and you realize you're 10% of the way through it. That's really demotivating. The cognitive dissonance I want you to start thinking about, though, is to try and be both proud of the trail that you've hiked already and excited about the trail that's in front of you. These are two really hard thoughts to have in your brain at the same time, but they're essential for looking after yourself. Because if you look at the trail you've already hiked and go, that's not good enough, it's demotivating. If you look at the trail in front of you and go, that's too big, it's demotivating. So trying to find that cognitive dissonance and be happy with what you've achieved and celebrate it, but still be motivated for the future is the mindset that I encourage you to think of. Okay, that's it. That's my talk. Thank you very much. There's a few QR codes here. If you want to learn more about Tech Leaders Launchpad, you can scan that first QR code. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn, that's the last QR code. I do lots of posts on leadership type stuff, and I do regular fortnightly live streams with tech leaders throughout the industry. You can find that on my LinkedIn. If you want to have a chat with me about this type of stuff or anything tech leader related, scan that middle QR code. And thank you. And let's transition to Q&A.
Thank you, Andrew, so much. I really like that cheeky tip about booking time with your boss. That was great, because you're totally right. People just ignore calendar invites all the time. So yeah. I collected some Q&A in advance, but feel free to drop some stuff in the chat. We'll do a quick Q&A before doing some breakout sessions. The first question, this is from Nick Tolentino. Do you believe with all these tips and tricks that a true balance is possible between IC work and management work, or will it always kind of feel like a compromise?
Leadership in general is a compromise. Leadership is always a compromise. One of the things that you realize when you transition into leadership and the higher and higher you get into leadership is there's always more work than time. There just is. Your to-do list is only ever getting longer, not shorter. And the job of becoming a leader and the job of moving up the ladder of leadership is less about finding ways to get your entire to-do list done and more about finding those things in the to-do list and prioritizing them based on the impact that they have. You can imagine that, the CTO of an organization, there is just no time they can ever tick everything off in their to-do list. So leadership in general is a compromise. The way that I'd encourage you to think about it is to make conscious decisions about what's the most impactful thing you can do next. Sometimes if you're in this transition role where you're doing some IC work and some manager work, sometimes the most impactful thing you can do is IC work. Sometimes it's leadership work. And making that conscious decision is how we make sure we're doing the things right by our team.
That's great. If you had to give a percentage, like an average percentage or estimate or range or whatever, what do you think is a good amount of IC work to aim for if you're the manager of a small engineering team? And this question comes from Dom.
Sure, it depends. I'll give you the model that I use. So I used to work in consultancies, and one of the things consultancies are really, really strong on is working out what percentage billable hours somebody is for obvious reasons. And so I used to use a model that I'll share with you that was appropriate for the consultancies that I work in, but that might not be appropriate for you. So the model that I used to use is for every mid-level and above person in your team, 5% of your time should be spent supporting them. For every junior person in your team, 10% of your time should be spent supporting them. So say, for example, you've had 3 mid-levels and a junior, that's 25% of your time that you should be solely dedicated on supporting them. That was the model that I used in consultancies that worked well, but it's going to change massively depending on who you are and who your team is. If your team needs a lot of technical advice and support, you might find yourself doing that a lot. If your team doesn't need that and they're pretty self-sufficient, you might find yourself spending more time on leadership stuff. So you come up with a model that works for you, but recognize that that model is going to change depending on as you grow and develop and as your team grows and develops.
Got it. We'll take one more question from Sylvie. What excites or energizes you in the tech leadership space at the moment?
Oh, I love that. I love the fact that this is something we talk about as an industry. I, when I started 15 years ago, the idea of getting together and talking about leadership stuff, you would be laughed out of the room. And now 15 years later, we've got meetups like this one, and you know, I'm one of the organizers of CTO School Australia, and you know, an entire meetup dedicated to helping people. I'm excited about the fact that we are talking about this more. Another thing that I'm excited about is the influx of people from non-traditional backgrounds. When I started my career 20 years ago, everybody in my university course was a carbon copy of me, a middle-class white male from, you know, a relatively affluent background. That was what the industry was 20 years ago. And I'm really excited to see that shift and see that change, because that's going to give a whole heap of new perspectives to leadership.
Got it. Thank you so much. I'm going to transition this to the group discussion. I'm going to stop recording.